Welcome, dear students, to this analysis of the extract Shakespeare and His Sister by Virginia Woolf. This extract is taken from Virginia Woolf's essay, A Room of One's Own. Virginia Woolf was born in Victorian London in an intellectual, financially comfortable family. She was very much influenced by her father. In her early 20s, she helped form the Bloomsbury Group, an intellectual circle of writers and artists which was very famous. Woolf had been writing since she was 14, but it was not until she was 33 that her first novel, The Voyage Out, was published. She became an established and successful writer with the publication of Jacob's Room and Mrs. Dalloway, in which she explored the technique of stream of consciousness method, which is characterized by a flow of thoughts and images which may not always appear to have a coherent structure or cohesion. The plot line may weave in and out of time and place. She excelled in this technique. Her writing emphasizes personal impressions over external events and focus on experiencing life in the moment. She suffered with depression and anxiety. She witnessed death and she was abused, and all these led to depression later on. And finally, she took her own life. The book, A Room of One's Own, is actually a product of two lectures that she gave in two colleges, Newman College and Girton College. She was invited to give lectures on women and fiction. This A Room of One's Own is considered a pioneering work of feminist criticism which aims to expose sexist attitudes in or toward literature and to analyze how gender affects writers' subjects, themes, and even style. She developed the two lectures into this famous essay collection, A Room of One's Own. The extract, Shakespeare and His Sister, is from this collection, A Room of One's Own. She has created a fictional sister for Shakespeare to find out why women writers were absent during the time of Shakespeare. A Room of One's Own is actually a study on why women artists or women writers couldn't write, and why the history of English literature is devoid of women writers. The two main arguments that run through A Room of One's Own is, one is a woman must have money and a room of her own if she has to write fiction. The dramatic setting of this essay collection is it's about the two lectures that she was invited to deliver on women and fiction, and she creates an imaginary narrator. She says, she can be called Mary Benton or Mary Seton or Mary Carmichael or whatever name you please. It's not a matter of any importance. What is important is her position as a woman, and that determines what she will write and how she will write, and if she can't write, and that also is about her position as a woman. The narrator begins her investigation at Oxford College, where she reflects on different educational experiences available to men and women during her time. And then she spends a day in the British Library and finds little data about the everyday lives of women. And also she doesn't find any works by women among the works of Shakespeare. And then she remembers the deceased bishop saying that it is impossible for a woman to have the genius of that of Shakespeare. Actually, the declaration made by this bishop provoked her to create this fictional sister for Shakespeare. She creates this sister for Shakespeare, names her as Judith, and imagines the fate of Judith Shakespeare, and then finally concludes that it would have been impossible completely and entirely for any woman to have written the plays of Shakespeare in the age of Shakespeare, and she finds out the reasons for that. One is they are devoid of education, then they are utterly at the mercy of others, especially father, and they will be married off early in life. And describing the life of women during that time, she moves on to say that genius doesn't it's not to be found among the servile, laboring, middle-class people. And if the condition of men who are not well off, if the condition is that, then for women it is far more different. They are far more troubled by their by the suppression, oppression that they face in their real life. She says, it is impossible for a woman to have a room of her own and money. She'll be at the mercy of her parents and later on husband. And then she moves on to analyze the state of mind which is congenial for creativity. And then she finds that Shakespeare's mind is incandescent, without any obstacles, without any disturbances. So that is why he was able to conceive those plays and produce them as it is. And the life of a woman writer is entirely different. There are obstacles, hindrances, and mentally, emotionally, and also the physical hindrances that she faces. Then she talks about certain tools used by the patriarchal society to suppress women, chastity, then their life as a woman, how family life, how motherhood, children are used against women. In this extract, Shakespeare Sister from Room of One's Own, she creates this sister for Shakespeare, and then she compares both William Shakespeare and Judith Shakespeare. Both of them are gifted with quickest fancy for tune of words. Both had a taste for theatre, and both looked alike with grey eyes and rounded brows, but their fate, it differed. Shakespeare had the opportunity to learn at a grammar school, but Judith Shakespeare was never sent to study. Shakespeare married and had a child. The other one, Judith Shakespeare, was forced to get married, but she refused and had to run away. Shakespeare found his career as a servitor, actor, and then dramatist. He was known by everybody. He could walk around freely and even had access to the Queen, and finally became the greatest dramatist. But on the contrary, Judith Shakespeare fled and took the road to London, but she couldn't succeed. Nobody entertained her in the theatre. The managers sent her away, saying that women couldn't act. Remember, during Shakespeare's time, women's roles were played by young boys. She couldn't roam around in the street. She couldn't observe men and their ways, and she couldn't practice her art. And finally, she got impregnated with Nick Green, an actor manager, who took mercy on her. But finally, she ended her life. The main theme that runs in this extract, one is women's position in fiction and in real life, then the critique of patriarchal society. Then she talks about the material and social difficulties. The first one, that is women's position in fiction. In fiction, women are of highest importance, pervades poetry from cover to cover, and dominates the lives of kings and conquerors in fiction. Inspired words and profound thought in literature fall from her lips. And the good examples are Clytemnestra, Lady Macbeth, Cleopatra, Rosalind, Antigone, Duchess of Malfi. They are all very strong women characters. But on the contrary, the real life of women during that time was entirely different. They were insignificant, absent from history. They were the property of her husband and the slave of marriage, and were not educated. But in fiction, they are represented as totally somebody else. In 1400s, wife beating was common and nobody questioned that. And if a woman refused to marry, those women were locked up in the room, beaten and starved, and nobody questioned. And in 1600s also, the situation was not much better, and few could actually find especially the upper class women could find husbands of their own, but their life was not that better. Then another thing that she makes about is the critique of the patriarchal society. She talks about chastity and how men are considered superior to women, especially male writers. She gives examples from Pericles, who said that publicity in women is detestable, and the bishop who said it is impossible for any woman to have the genius of Shakespeare. And then Mr. Oscar Browning said woman's intellect is inferior to the worst man's. So she cites these examples to make this point clear that the patriarchal society could never accept a woman writing. And then she talks about the material and social difficulties faced by writers in general. But for Shakespeare, she says he was different. And for genius like Shakespeare is not born among laboring, uneducated, servile people. It is not possible for such people to write like Shakespeare. So these are the main arguments that she makes, and the extract Shakespeare and His Sister ends with her analysis on the state of mind that a writer like Shakespeare would possess. So that state of mind is incandescent, without any obstacles or hindrances, without any forces or criticism of the society that will pull you down. So only then you could write something like Shakespeare, who never blotted a line. And for women writers, it is totally impossible to achieve that state of mind, because they don't have a room of her own, they don't have money. And even if they could get some spare time, there would be distractions, the indifference of the society, thoughts about livelihood, thoughts about chastity, thoughts about the society. So she won't be able to write like Shakespeare. That is the main reason why the history of English literature is devoid of women writers. So thus she concludes this extract, Shakespeare and His Sister. Thank you.